Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. The new network of Caribbean SBDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Inglés, probando inglés. Pablo. Te escucho un poco bajo. Ahora sí. Ahí mejor. Thank you, you too. Bueno, entonces pasamos a francés. Francés, probando francés. Muy bien, Elizabeth. Perfecto. Muy bien. Seguimos con la segunda cabina de francés. Probando. Catherine, buenos días. Se escucha muy bien. Nos vamos a portugués. Cabina de portugués. Probando portugués. Silvia. Tudo bem, Silvia. Se escuta muito bem. Chao. Segunda cabina de portugués. Probando. Silvia, veo que estás con el micrófono ahí. José. Perfecto, José. Se escuta muito bem. Muito obrigado. Nos vamos a español. Cabina de español.
Hola, perdona, es que no encontraba la ventanilla. Buenos días.
Segunda cabina de español.
Buenos días, es Alessandra en la cabina de español. Muy buenos días, ¿se oye bien? Muchísimas gracias.
La segunda cabina de inglés la probamos.
Good morning, Antigua and Barbuda is present.
Good morning.
Good
Thank you
morning.
very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SBDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact.
Thank you very much.
We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever.
Ambassador Sanders, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we cannot see you.
You can't see me.
Yep.
Can you see me now?
Now, yes, we can see you.
Okay. Is that all look well set up?
Thank you so much.
Pretty well. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sir Haynes.
Madam Chair, distinguished delegations, good morning. Madam Chair, with your permission, I would like to read the list of countries that are present here in the Hall of the Americas.
Hello. Good morning. Ambassador Sam Hines, joining from...
Madam Chair, with your permission, I would like to read a list of countries that are here present and
Con su permiso, Presidenta, quisiera leer la lista de países que están presentes de forma virtual. Antigua y Barbuda, Argentina, Barbados, Belice, Bolivia, Brasil, Canadá, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Estados Unidos, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haití, Honduras, México, Paraguay, Perú, República Dominicana, San Vicente y las Granadinas, Santa Lucía, Surinam, Uruguay y Venezuela. Señora Presidenta, esta reunión dispone del quórum reglamentario.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues.
Buenos días, distinguidos colegas. Habiendo verificado que disponemos de quórum, me complace abrir esta sesión ordinaria del Consejo Permanente. Siendo esta la primera reunión bajo la presidencia de San Vicente y las Granadinas, deseo dejar sobre que conste en actas el compromiso de mi país de trabajar asiduamente en el cumplimiento de los mandatos de la Asamblea General de la OEA, relacionados con el impacto de las cuestiones medioambientales, la pobreza, así como el fortalecimiento y la coordinación y cooperación hemisférica para combatir eficazmente la COVID-19. Esto incluye también el tratamiento de los efectos devastadores en el ámbito socioeconómico de la pandemia, que requieren una atención permanente del Consejo Permanente y que serán tratados junto con otros mandatos que quedan pendientes por cumplirse. Como se desprende el plan de trabajo del Consejo Permanente, que se distribuyó a todas
on behalf of the Permanent Council to convey our congratulations to the peoples and governments of the following member states on the recent celebration
¿En sala me escuchas? Sí, ahora sí se escucha. A ver, probando. Neto, ¿sí? ¿Tenés piso? ¿Listo? ¿No? ¿Sí? ¿En mudo? ¿Me escuchan? ¿Sí? Listo. Probando interpretación. ¿Se escucha, María Margarita?
Español, español, 1, 2, 3, español, español.
Madam Chair. The system failures that we've experienced this morning, the technical failures of our equipment, we can confirm that the audio and video have been restored and that those joining virtually are now able to see and hear us. Madam Chair, the meeting may proceed. Thank you.
Puede dar comienzo la sesión. Muchísimas gracias. Me complace declarar abierta esta segunda sesión del Consejo Permanente convocada para considerar los temas contenidos en el orden del día CP/OD 2384/22 que someterá a consideración del Consejo Permanente. No habiendo más observaciones, se aprueba el orden del día. Considerando la solicitud hecha por la delegación de Surinam,
We will now proceed.
Se procederá al siguiente punto del orden del día, que es el informe de la Presidencia de la Comisión de Asuntos Administrativos y Presupuestarios y la consideración del techo presupuestario para 2023. Considerando la solicitud de la delegación de la misión permanente de Surinam, contenida en el documento CP.
Report in writing, which was distributed as document CP in 9408/22, and which will be presented by Ms. Carolina Vera, alternate representative of Paraguay and second vice chair of the CAP. Madam Vice Chair, welcome. You have the floor.
Buenos días, estimada Presidenta del Consejo Permanente, Embajadora de San Vicente y las Granadinas, Luan Hilrich. En mi calidad de Vicepresidenta Segunda.
Good morning to the distinguished Chair of the Permanent Commission. As the Vice Chair of the Budgetary Commission, it is my pleasure to report on the request made by the Suriname delegation that a report by the CAP be presented for 2023. I will now read the document that was distributed as CP 98/22, which contains the cited document transmitted by Uji Marco de Barro Nunes, the alternative representative of Brazil to the OAS. I will read the report. The Commission of Budgetary and Administrative Affairs considered the ceiling for 2023 in the meetings held in the meeting on the 19th of of April, 12th of March, 14th of June, and 17th of July 2022, in addition to holding informal meetings in an effort on reaching a consensus. The CAP initiated deliberations on the Secretary of Administration and Finances on the sources of financing that was distributed as the document /22, and it is the Assembly is reminded, the Commission is reminded that there is a requirement of a 90-day advance notice in advance of the General Assembly. The President proposed the 7th of June 2022 as the deadline for CAP to give the General Secretariat the orientation necessary so as to give delegations sufficient time to carry out consultations. At the outset, two proposals were received, $81 million and $83 million by the delegation of Mexico and Canada, respectively. Both positions received support during those negotiations. Thereafter, the delegation of Brazil presented an intermediary proposal for $82 million. After further deliberations, on the 14th of June, 2022, the CAP considered a proposal for $82.3 million that obtained a support of a majority of delegations that previously had supported $81 million or $83 million proposals. Along these same lines, the delegation of Bahamas proposed a $84,970,000. At that time, no consensus was reached, and taking into consideration the request presented by the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica, Suriname, Bahamas, Haiti, and St. Lucia, of having more time for consultations, the chair convened another informal meeting on the 17th of July. At 17th of June, on the 17th of June meeting, a new presentation was made of a budgetary limit of $83 million. At this time, this was presented by the delegation of Guyana as a representative of a majority of CARICOM. This group considered that the responsible option to support the organization was to raise the limit to $83 million, and that it would set a poor precedent to take budgetary decisions without considering the payment of all quotas of all member states. To be able to reach consensus, the delegation of Canada proposed $82.5 million, which was suggested by the delegation of Ecuador in an informal meeting held on that same day, which received the support of 10 other delegations: Brazil, United States, Chile, Paraguay, Peru, Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Venezuela. The delegations of the United States, Canada, Paraguay, Argentina, Costa Rica, Brazil, and Guatemala expressed concern and opposition to take this decision to the Permanent Council. And the delegation of Guatemala, in one more effort at reaching a consensus, proposed a ceiling of $82.7 million, which was supported by Jamaica. It was requested that the Secretariat indicate what the concrete impact would be between the difference 82.3 and 83.7 million. And the President, as informed by the Secretariat, replied, and to that the Chair replied that the difference of 400,000 could represent the financing of 2 to 3 work positions. On the other hand, the delegations reported concern that a budgetary limit of 83 million was beyond the reasonable and expected income levels for 2023 on the base of payment histories since 2014.
propuesta de un tope de ejecución de 82.7.
At that time, the chair proposed to pause the meeting and ask delegations to make consultations with their capitals and consider the proposal of a ceiling at a level of US 82.7 million. Once returned from the break, the chair put forward for consideration these delegations should request, rather, the delegation of Bahamas, Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica, and Belize informed that they were still in consultations and they were not able to join consensus at that time. The CAP chair informed delegations that he will wait for further input, particularly from delegations who could not at that time join the consensus on the latest proposal of 82.7 million prior to convening another formal meeting to consider this topic. On June 28, 2022, the delegation of Colombia distributed a note reaffirming its earlier stated support for a ceiling of USD 82.5 million and its flexibility to join a consensus decision of up to 82.7 million. On July 6, 2022, the delegation of Mexico distributed a note putting forward its preference for a budget ceiling of 81 million. In view of the financial difficulties experienced by the organization, but also signaling that Mexico would not oppose a consensus at the level of 82.7 million, to which, this notwithstanding, the delegation of Mexico would put forward a footnote. According to the general standards of the OAS, the day in which this report was distributed, which was July 7, 2022, it should be the last day for the General Secretary to distribute the draft 2023 budget program proposal to all member states. Said deadline has now been missed. The CAP will resume consideration of the ceiling once it receives feedback from the delegations which could not support the last proposal of USD 82.7 million. That would be the conclusion of the report. By way of additional support, to date 13 presentations have formally and informally expressed that this topic continue being addressed within the CAP. In terms of the technical team, we would request the goodwill and the flexibility of member states to be able to discuss and to make sure that CAP's mission comes to fruition for our budget for 2023. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The delegation of Suriname is requesting the floor. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Distinguished permanent representatives and observers, alternative representatives, staff of the OAS, and other participants. Madam Chair, let me first congratulate you with the assumption of the Chair of the Permanent Council. As you know, you can always count on my support and that of my delegation. I also want to thank Ambassador Darius Clark from St. Lucia for the work she has done in the last 3 months. The Permanent Council needs a steady hand to guide its deliberations, and we wish you all the best. Madam Chair, my delegation requested this agenda item after consultations with CARICOM member states to be discussed this morning because it is important that in accordance with the general standards, the budget should be presented 90 days before the start of the General Assembly. This deadline has passed and that began to worry us. It is for this main reason that we thought that it would be good to request the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs to present a report to the PC. The PC is the one who should get a report because the PC is the one who establishes committees, also the permanent committees. So this is a normal request that was made to put this item on the agenda. We are happy to note that in line with the request put forward, the chair of CAP has put forward a report to the PC. So now we are informed about the recent work of CAP. The report deals mainly with the budget ceiling, so it is fair to say that this is the issue we should be dealing with as well when we discuss the report. In fact, the report states that after 6 formal and 3 informal meetings, there has not yet been a consensus on the budget ceiling. Thus, it seems that after reading this report, the PC should assist the committee to move forward, and that is exactly what we should try to do. We do not say that we should have a vote on the budget ceiling, even if that may be necessary in the future. That is if CAP doesn't make further progress on this item. We would rather prefer that we assist the CAP and actually call upon all member states to move forward to reach a decision in the committee and report that decision back to us in the PC. But we should put a deadline and probably provide some guidelines in order to move the process forward. So I hope that this is what we should focus on today. Thus, the question before the PC is not what should the budget ceiling be, because there are still different proposals on the table, but how we are moving forward with a good speed and clear guidance so that CAP can finish its job and report back. We as permanent representatives of this organization are responsible that the OAS functions properly and has the finances to do so. I know that budget and organizational issues are not a very sexy issue, but they still are important and need our attention. Madam Chair, in a budget, there are some minimal aspects that should be looked at. The budget is a planning tool for an organization which wants to reach its goals. You need to estimate the cost to do the activities which will get you the results to reach those goals. The budget ceiling is the estimate to help this process of planning along. It is an estimate, but we still need to know the assumptions and figures that make up this estimate, because that will make it easier for us to reach a consensus. Here is where things sometimes get foggy, because we assume that every country is paying its quotas, which is not the case. We also assume that countries pay on time, which is also not the case. And we probably underestimate inflation. At the same time, we give discounts to those who pay up early, but there are no sanctions for members that are way behind. So we have to look at all the assumptions and regulations to see if they are still realistic and adjust the figures to arrive at a real ceiling. In the report, we see different numbers for the budget ceiling, but it would have been good if the CAP explained the rationale behind each number, so that member states can make informed decisions and not just have to choose between one number or another number. So this could be 2 guidelines: provide the assumptions and provide the rationale behind the different numbers. Madam Chairs, there are also gains to make in the budget if we do things more efficient and look into all aspects of the organization to see where we need to strengthen it or where we could do it less. But we do not have time for that exercise now. Nevertheless, it should be done at some point. I suggest before the next budget cycle, so that we have an organization that caters to the goals that were set by its member states. Madam Chair, we can continue to talk about issues within the organization that needs improvement, but the organization without a budget cannot perform to its fullest. In this regard, we want to call on all member states to keep on negotiating in good faith. It is our sincere hope that during this PC meeting, we can discuss the parameters for the cap to reach an agreement on the budget ceiling and report back within a set time, say 1 or 2 weeks, to this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now offer the floor to the distinguished ambassador of the Bahamas. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair. This being the first opportunity to greet you in your capacity as the Chair of the Permanent Council brings honor to my delegation and to the region from which we hail. This period of the Council is adapted from an ancestry and religious hymn and is affectionately known as the occasion when the saints go marching in. We've had the privilege of being led by St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, to whom we express through you appreciation to Ambassador Darius Clark, the outgoing chair, for her stellar stewardship, and now on to your tenure as a delegation of St. Vincent and Grenadines. So given this morning's topic, we greet you as both the chair of the Permanent Council and the chair of the Preparatory Committee, and we welcome you this morning in what I trust will not be a baptism by fire. Madam Chair, as a matter of procedure and clarification, in view of the content and duration of my presentation this morning, on behalf of CARICOM, in keeping with the rules of procedure of the Permanent Council, noting the limitations established for interventions, I wish to confirm that several delegations of CARICOM, namely the delegations of Barbados, Belize, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago, have so graciously ceded 83 seconds to my delegation to enable the continuity of this presentation. Madam Chair, we thank the distinguished delegation of Suriname in their capacity as the chair of Caucus of CARICOM Ambassadors to the OAS for the request and introduction of this agenda item, and we associate ourselves with the statement made by the distinguished delegation of Suriname accordingly. Madam Chair, we thank profusely and in earnest the Vice Chair of CAP for the presentation of the report regarding the deliberations related to the 2023 budget ceiling. Madam Chair, this morning's presentation will be structured in 4 components as follows. 1, the rationale for the requested report on the CAP deliberations. 2, anticipated actions by CAP. 3, a response to the report of the chair from CAP. And 4, recommendations in respect of actions that the PC should consider. Firstly, the rationale for the request of the report on CAP and their deliberations. Madam Chair, we will seek to demystify certain matters relative to the request for the convening of today's Permanent Council meeting and its objectives. Accordingly, please be assured that CARICOM has absolutely no ulterior motives in proposing this agenda item to the Council. In fact, it was anticipated that the necessary and appropriate actions being sought here in this Council would have been duly addressed by those given carriage and certainly prior to today. Contrary to any suspicion, this meeting is definitely not an attempt to hijack the budget preparation process. In fact, this meeting is quite the opposite. This meeting represents a moment for a collective stock-taking at all the requisite levels. Thus, elevating discussions to the Permanent Council does not predetermine what the outcomes of those deliberations may be. And, as is the norm when there have been impasses on other OAS issues, discussions at the Permanent Council do not foreclose dialogue, but actually elevates and enhances dialogue. For those who think this Council is just the forum for political questions, while it is of course pivotal for budgetary discussions to be rooted in technical precepts, the act of setting a budget and determining priorities is inherently a political decision. Just like the decision to starve the organization for 7 years was a political one, all of which speaks to the extent to which we, as a collective, value this organization. The opportunity is presented to offer further directives and also to make definitive decisions. That's what we do here in this Council. Colleagues, CARICOM is seeking to assist in being responsive, transparent, and yes, responsible. Madam Chair, as we all must be aware by now, Article 96 of the General Standards mandates that the Secretary General shall present the proposed program budget to the Preparatory Committee and send a copy to the Chair of CD together with a litany of other items A through J, 10 additional items besides the budget. And this must be done at least 90 days before the opening of the date of the General Assembly session. The General Assembly is scheduled to convene on October 5th through the 7th in 2022 in Peru, and we look forward to that, which invariably places the mandate which was bestowed to CAP, which is now past due. The deadline for the presentation of the 2023 budget was July 7th, 2022, hence the attendant urgency and the request by CARICOM towards, not away from, adherence. Given the foregoing, CAP is out of compliance and invariably requires a renewed mandate. You come to the council to renew your mandate. You don't take it upon yourself. For context, it is particularly important to note that Article 120 of the General Standards places the responsibility for fiscal supervision and compliance under the direct remit of the Permanent Council, along with the Audit Committee and through the External Auditor and the Inspector General, not the CAP. Given the expiration of the deadline to present the budget and having regard to the stalemate which was motivated and has been exacerbated at the advisory committee level, as clearly illustrated via the de facto edict which was communicated in paragraphs 14 and 17 of the report from CAP, it is therefore quite appropriate and deemed absolutely necessary for the CAP to update the Permanent Council on the deliberations around the budget ceiling, and for the Permanent Council, the entity which has devolved responsibilities to the CAP, not from the CAP, to take a decision on how deliberations might proceed or to give consideration on a pathway to meet with full compliance, inclusive of bringing resolve within the council itself. We consider compliance as ultimately vital to the effective and efficient management and operation of the organization. As such, in the vein of honoring its shared custodial duties, we shall endeavor to render support and guidance in this regard, in addition to assisting in the enhancement of the levels of discipline that is required in these instances. Some have posed the question as to why come to the Permanent Council as opposed to continuing discussions in the CAP. Member states are respectfully reminded that the CAP is not an entity unto itself. Article 99 of the General Standards establishes CAP's technical, advisory, and subordinate role to the Permanent Council. As such, CAP has an ongoing obligation, not an independent prerogative, to report to and with the consent of this body, the Permanent Council, whether it's about the budget ceiling or other administrative budgetary matters. CAP, which also serves as the subcommittee for administrative and budgetary affairs, should equally report to the preparatory committee within the prescribed deadline. Therefore, this obligation and these actions are of particular necessity and significance on this occasion to receive a report, because CAP has not met their established mandate, which was time-bound, unless, by some stretch of the imagination, we are by extension or by fiat attributing or granting ultra-virus latitude to CAP, or is it that we are suggesting that CAP proceed ad infinitum with no deadline, no plan, no accountability whatsoever to this body, its principal authority? Madam Chair, we will now give attention to component 2, the anticipated actions by CAP. Simply, Madam Chair, simply as a management practice, as a matter of courtesy and of mere decency and respect, there ought to have been a number of ensuing actions that should have and could have been taken by CAP. 1, CAP should have communicated, preferably in writing, to the respective chairs of the PC, the PrepCom, the CD, and to SAF, and to the Secretary General, providing an update or conveying an advisement that the budget ceiling decision was likely to be delayed. The PC in the first instance and the other related bodies deserve the respect of being told that the deadline can't be met and why. This speaks to a larger systemic concern: the absence of discipline, the absence of consequences in the organization. There are no consequences to certain actions that range from not paying dues to delaying or never meeting reporting deadlines and obligations. 2, the CAP should have offered an alternative timeline or a revised plan of action. 3, in an effort at forging a consensus, CAP should have sought to broker or enter into direct discussions and dialogue with the respective proponents of the opposing proposals. Madam Chair, being mindful of our own diligence process, we are not aware of these basic actions being pursued or being completed by CAP. However, we stand to be corrected. If so, the opportunity is open to inform this council with the particulars and results thereof. Additionally, if said actions were taken, they ought to have been prominently reflected in the report that was presented today. Madam Chair, why should it even take a prompting from CARICOM requesting a PC meeting or an agenda item from CAP to respond? These actions do not and should not fall on CARICOM or any other member state. Using the analogy that if the OAS were a private corporate entity and a department missed a reporting deadline or anticipates as much and doesn't bring the matter to the attention of the Board of Directors, what should be the response or action taken by the Board of Governors? Madam Chair, at this juncture, before going on to component 3, we wish to dispel a matter of some contention. It is alleged that there has been a disregard for dialogue and cooperation, and I quote, disregard for dialogue and cooperation. I suspect the direct quote was pointed in one direction. With that very point in mind and not giving the matter any validity, credence, or defense, and certainly not to sound sanctimonious, I will exercise a moment of liberty and speak as the delegation of the Bahamas here and offer some unsolicited advice to whom it may concern. If we want a successful dialogue, we should seek to engage respectfully. No need for threats, no need for trash talking and the like. No need for ego tripping and superiority complexes. So more precisely, when interacting with CARICOM, I beseech all to speak to us, not at us, and certainly not past us. Madam Chair, if that cogent set of rules are duly abided, going forward, I have every confidence that we should have absolutely no difficulties in future dialogue, and cooperation will certainly go swimmingly. Madam Chair, in the matter of component 3, expectations of the CAP report. The expectation of this type of report we should have been receiving from CAP should be comprised of technical advice. After all, Article 99 of the General Standards clearly fosters that expectation. We would have anticipating receiving a composite calculation and technical analysis by the CAP in respect of deriving the budget's ceiling proposals and the related impact, not a hyperlink in paragraph 2 of the SAF that came from SAF. The report should tell the PC exactly how the proponents are arriving at their respective proposals, including justifications. Madam Chair, I'm resisting the urge to address the multiple missed opportunities in this report. When we examine each paragraph, it leaves us in a state. Take, for instance, paragraph 1. It is reported that a total of 9 meetings were held. However, it appears that the crux of this document, which contains 17 paragraphs, captures only 2 meetings, the meetings of June 14th and June 17th. It would be most unfortunate if someone were to get the impression that this document that is before us is either an expansive, informative, or technical report. This document is an editorial of 2 meetings presented from one particular vantage. Paragraph 7, notwithstanding the constant assertion that there was or is a consensus position and CARICOM is at odds with the same, it is sincerely appreciated that this report conveys that a consensus was still being sought. But further down in the report, it says that a consensus was derived. Please be advised that in this same paragraph, it was suggested and admitted that the coalition supporting 82.5 was at 11. CARICOM is a group of 14 member states. Even if you omit the Bahamas, as we will see later in the report as well, Jamaica from the count, according to the laws of modern mathematics, 12 is always greater than 11. Why was in CARICOM's position the prevailing and leading proposal? Why was in CARICOM's position the consensus? Take a real close read of paragraphs 14 and 17. It is these very paragraphs that has brought us here today. The statements made therein were memorialized twice in this report. I suspect, that is in paragraphs 14 and 17. I suspect for emphasis, and it is also reflected in an email through the Secretary of CAP of June 21st, 2022, and has been repeated at will, wherever, whenever, and as often and when given the opportunity. This statement and these paragraphs should grate on all of our consciousness. It is severely tone deaf. I encourage those that support this approach to take a very close and careful read, taking in all possibilities. The essence of the statement says, if you don't agree with $82.7 million as the ceiling, there will be no CAP meetings until you agree. Come back to us when you agree with the $82.7 million. This statement is an
Excellency, you have gone over 15 minutes. I'm asking you respectfully if you could wrap up.
Certainly,
Thank you.
Certainly, I will go on to the component 4, what it is that we expect from the direction from CAP. Madam Chair, if today's meeting of the Permanent Council only achieves receipt of an editorial without resolution or definitive action, we would have all been derelict in our duties. Accordingly, we therefore commend the following to the Permanent Council. Under a resolves action point, the PC directs the CAP to continue deliberation on the budget ceiling and revert to the PC with a proposal decision by the 27th of July 2022, at least 2 weeks from today. 2, encourage the chair of the CAP to incorporate direct engagement with countries that made budgetary ceiling proposals in an effort to generate consensus. And 3, CAP should endeavor to continue conducting its deliberations in an atmosphere of respect and transparency. Just because our 14 states are small should never mean that we should be rendered invisible. I trust that you've listened intently, and I thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bahamas. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador of Mexico. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, I simply wanted to point out that Mexico puts forward a call that we need to be accountable. We cannot be planning on false hopes, on money that we do not have. We have done this thus far, and this has led us to this very critical situation where we urge, or Mexico has been very responsible. We truly need to be respectful and mindful of the situation that we are in now. Inflationary rates are now at 9.1. COLA for next year will be Thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope that you are able to hear me at this juncture. Very briefly, we reiterate, we would like to put forward a call. We need to be responsible based on the resources and funds that we have at our disposal. We understand that the work has been exemplary by the chair of CAP. Mexico has been there for all informal and formal meetings, and it just stresses all of the efforts, the ongoing efforts by the chairmanship to move forward with this specific topic. Time, of course, is of the essence, and it will make us set budgets with resources that we do not have, and that's irresponsible. I was saying today that the numbers, inflation, stand at 9.1%, and what we will have to pay based on inflation, this is a topic which will be very difficult for us to take on in light of the critical situation that we find ourselves. I urge all of my colleagues, all ambassadors, to take part in the CAP meetings. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
To the representative of Brazil. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, we appreciate your role of chairing as the Vice President, and to thank you also for the mission of Brazil. We want to say at the outset that we are in agreement with the proposal of the representative from Bahamas on a plan of action, a forum, and a modality to attend the question that concerns us today. In second and third place, the delegation of Brazil appreciates the intervention of the ambassadors of Suriname and Mexico, the first of this in a constructive spirit, enlightens us as to the reasons for the meeting to be convened and this address, and the intervention of the permanent representative of Mexico in support of the work of CAC. Of the previous interventions, let me note some aspects which are not necessarily a reason for dissent in this organization or any other. The first has to do with the lawfulness or the legality. We are all concerned about the legality of all the decisions taken in the organization and the juridical or legal bases. Secondly, the discipline. This has to do to meeting the desires of all of our countries of being fiscally responsible in addressing budgetary concerns and that of our public officials. No delegation more than Brazil will support efforts at a true disciplined way to address the work of this organization, not only in terms of the budget, but in all of the aspects and the endeavors of the organization's work. Let me say also that the responsibility of decisions, this was already mentioned, this is a collective responsibility. It is not a responsibility of any one organ of the organization or the president of a commission or chair of a commission or the secretary general or any group of delegations. It is always a collective responsibility by its very nature. Let me point out the constructive spirit in which all are participating in this. It would be erroneous to note otherwise. These are there are mature and responsible ways to address even the differences of opinion or divergences in our views. These are not decisions that we will take. I always say that consensus can be likened to cohesion. No integrating an integrated organization can work without taking care of this maximum value of our work, which is cohesion among our member states. Cohesion for an organization like ours, or even an international court. A more technical consideration on Brazil. On Brazil's side, we appreciate Carolina Vera for the review of the threshold for 2023's budgetary proposal. Brazil takes note of the fact that after the last informal meeting of CAP, delegations were yet to pronounce their opposition to the 82.7 ceiling threshold, and that hasn't happened. We understand all of us are working amongst our various priorities and capacities, but we hope that very soon today we'll be able to retake this work in a substantive way. the inclusion of considerations on the ceiling in the regular agenda of the session. And we can see in the tenants in the trend showed in this session did not consider some expressed views of delegations in the hope that this would be addressed at the Permanent Council session. Even in 2020, less than 60 days before the General Assembly, a consensus had not yet been reached that was not addressed by this council. Our decision is not the place for us to talk about technical or budgetary aspects. Brazil is committed to reaching a consensus within the cap. Since 2017, the management of the OAS has worked to strengthen the regular reserve funds. Prior to that date, there were no other options but to just take on debts. We are more resilient organization as of today, and we congratulate the efforts since 2017 for the OAS to adopt responsible budgets. Recently, we presented delegation reports with budget ceilings above 82.7, and it was considered unacceptable that OAS would have in 2023 an adequate budget. And I would like to point out that the delegation of Brazil considers the chair of the CAP to be entirely independent in its work, as headed the delegation of Brazil, defends it is not the presidency of CAP as such. I'm speaking as a delegation of Brazil. And on this occasion, we do not question the quality of the different presentations made by the Secretariat, noting nonetheless that the facts having to do with miscellaneous expenses are mere projections. And no matter how much we trust those, no matter how much we say, we cannot absolutely ensure and unquestionably guarantee what percentage of those estimations on miscellaneous expenses will in fact be used. We expect that these and other lines of the budget can be explored further in the next session of the work of the CAP. And that is what the Permanent Council expects of the work of that commission. Thank you.
Delegates of St.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Permanent representatives, alternate representatives, permanent observers, chiefs of staff, Conke and Prince, secretaries of the various secretariats, other members of staff of the OAS General Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Madam Chair, since this is the first occasion that the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is taking the floor, please permit me to congratulate you on your assumption of chair of this distinguished body. My delegation is proud of you and wishes you the very best during your term as chair of the Permanent Council. We are confident that you will faithfully execute your duties. And Madam Chair, I'm using this opportunity as well to express gratitude on the job well done by the previous Permanent Council Chair, Ambassador Elizabeth Darris-Clark of St. Lucia. Madam Chair, as it relates to the agenda item, report of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, CAP, and consideration of the budget ceiling for the 2023 budget, the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines appreciates the report presented earlier by the Vice Chair of the CAP. We also, for the record, associate ourselves, of course, with the statement made by the coordinator of CARICOM, the Ambassador of Suriname. Madam Chair, my delegation is gravely concerned about the financial situation at the Organization of American States. As stated previously by the delegation of Suriname, we will reiterate the point that it is important to point out that we are late for the submission of the proposed program budget prior to the General Assembly. Hence, Madam Chair, since there was no more time for action in the CAP, the procedural and proper thing to do was to bring this matter to the Permanent Council here today. Madam Chair, going forward, and since the General Assembly is upon us, if problems of this nature reoccur, then the proper procedure is whenever there is no agreement in a committee, the matter has to be elevated to either the Permanent Council or the General Committee. And if there is a deadlock, then the matter naturally has to be referred to the plenary of the General Assembly. These are the rules, and this is how multilateralism works. Madam Chair, we deeply regret that to date there's no agreement on the budget ceiling for the financial year 2023, but after today's meeting, hopefully we should be heading there. Madam Chair, for too long, the financial health of this organization has been on the decline. Each year, the program budget of the regular fund is approved, then the number of mandates is increased, then staff is laid off due to a lack of funding. For example, Madam Chair, in 2000, there were 587 members of staff paid by the regular fund. As of 2022, there are 371 members of staff being paid by this fund, a reduction of 36%. Unfortunately, during this year, members of staff are already voluntarily taking separation packages, and come 2023, more may do so likewise. Indeed, this is not good for staff morale. It is a serious loss of institutional memory, and the organization is losing capable staff to other organizations. The OAS ought not to keep making cuts as a means of operating within a limited budget. Core functions must be performed, and key positions must be filled and maintained, taking into consideration ongoing reclassification exercises. On the question of mandates, the OAS years ago had more than 7,500 mandates, which were then reduced to 1,500, then to 750, and then further reduced. All of this in an admirable attempt to streamline the operations and to exercise fiscal prudence. Unfortunately, the number of mandates is increasing once more, and in the context of limited resources. Madam Chair, the financial situation is compounded when quotas are not collected. Over the years, this has led to some practices which are inimical to the financial health of the organization. Member states are the stewards of the OAS and should exercise more oversight of the organization's financial matters. Madam Chair, I now turn to the budget ceiling. It does not reflect growth in this organization and is not indexed to inflation. In 2000, the budget ceiling was US $78 million, and for this fiscal year, it stands at US $81 million. The annual quotas were last increased in 2008 and 2009. In 2017, due to a severe budget crisis, the regular fund program budget had to be cut to 73 million, whereas the year before, it stood at US 84 million. However, it is important to note that in 2009 to 2010, the OAS regular fund program budget ceiling was US 90 million. Ideally, if indexed to inflation from the years 2000 to 2022, our budget ceiling should be US 135 million, but the good folks at the Secretariat for Administration and Finance staff conservatively puts this figure at US 118 million. Madam Chair, respectfully, the point is that other international organizations have their annual quotas indexed by inflation. To further illustrate the point, many governments' annual budgets increase over time as well. Even in these difficult economic times, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, runaway inflation, constant vulnerability to ongoing external shocks, and other challenges prior to the pandemic, the budget ceiling for governments do increase. How could the budget ceiling of the OAS reasonably be an exception if the organization is to function effectively and efficiently and deliver on its commitments to the peoples of the Americas? This delegation, Madam Chair, recommends that the OAS continue with the process of streamlining through the prioritization of mandates and reductions where applicable. Also needed are a serious overhaul of operations and the undertaking of massive creative external resource mobilization where individuals, institutions, and countries can easily and legally contribute financially to the OAS. The OAS needs to restructure the various secretariats, departments, and units to ensure efficiencies and to generate cost savings. Another recommendation, Madam Chair, is that the independent group of experts need to meet to address and to settle the quota rebalancing process, which was not conducted on the principle of equity. Madam Chair, finally, the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines places on record that it urges all delegations to conduct negotiations at all times in an atmosphere of respect and collegiality to build bridges, promote understanding, and arrive at consensus. This is the essence of multilateralism. Madam Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I now offer the floor to the Permanent Representative of Canada. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you and good morning to colleagues as well. It's nice to see you on a beautiful summer day here in Washington. And let me start, Madam Chair, first, since it's the first time I've had the chance to take the floor with you and the Chair, to not only welcome you, but as with others, to offer our full support as you take on these important duties, and also to thank your predecessor, Ambassador Darius Clark, who so ably steered us through the last three very challenging months as well. Let me also start too by thanking the Vice Chair of the CAP for presenting the report this morning, and also Brazil as Chair of the CAP for the work that has been done in that extremely important organization, part of our organization so far this year. I can, I think, speak without fear of contradiction from personal experience that it is a significant and heavy responsibility, and we're very grateful for the efforts that have been made to discharge that. On the report that was presented this morning, I think amongst other things, it shows the number of efforts that have been made so far to reach consensus within the CAP on this issue. And having listened really closely to all of the interventions so far, I'm actually coming away quite confident that those efforts will continue and that we will be able to reach consensus on this point. And I wanted to make a couple of substantive comments and then maybe return to that theme towards the end of my brief intervention. On substance, the budget, in our view, needs to allow the organization to carry out its mandates, but at the same time limiting borrowing from the Treasury Fund. And the Ambassador Brazil had noted out that there has been work done over the past several years to try to put the finances of the organization on as sound a footing as possible. And I think it's important to recognize those efforts, even though I would agree as well that we need to continue to work on this and to do even more. Colleagues have mentioned, for example, challenges related to payment of quotas, and Canada has and will continue to encourage, exhort, plead, ask, beg members to pay their dues on time and in full. And if you were to look at the most recent list of payments, there's a number of our colleagues who have not yet been able to make their payments that remain in arrears, and we strongly, to the best of our ability, encourage them to try to do so, because it is important for the financial stability of the organization. And it gets back to this issue that we're talking about this morning, which is the budget ceiling, and it's an important issue as well. With the reality of the payment system that we have and the pace of payments being made, we realistically can't program beyond income levels that can be expected in 2023. We need to be realistic. We have to base income on payment patterns that have existed and have existed for some time. You can go back to 2014 or so and see the regular pattern of payments that are made, when they come in, the pace at which they happen, and so forth. And I think that's important background information for the deliberations. In practical terms, when we're talking about the budget ceiling, in a way, what we're talking about is risk management. How do we develop a budget that takes into account the income we can anticipate based on the commitments that members have made, that all of us have made, as well as past practice in fulfilling those commitments? And it does require a judgment. It's not a certainty. It requires some judgment based on what has happened in the past and what we might think about the future as well. And so for me anyway, it's not surprising there could be different perspectives on this issue because there could be different views of what the risk actually is and what we might anticipate the future to look like. I do think the best place to have those discussions, because it's where our technical experts really are, is in the CAP. Because I think that's the body where you bring the most depth of experience over time at looking at these patterns, looking at what is predictable, and looking at what some of the risks may be. And so again, I was heartened to hear some of the discussion this morning because I think there is a desire to work towards that consensus, and I think commitment from everybody, including from the chair of the CAP, to work together over the next days to try to reach that understanding together. There's still an opportunity for us to do this. And I think those discussions will be fruitful, like others too. And I think we're all saying the same thing. I think we all have. We'd encourage everybody to engage in those discussions and to reach consensus on this very important issue. One final note, Madam Chair, if I can, in your work plan for this quarter, we noticed that there's a proposed meeting to consider the financial situation of the OAS. That's an initiative that we would support. Thank you for putting that initiative forward. I think that meeting would present an opportunity to discuss how to strengthen the organization, how to ensure it's placed on a strong financial footing. Again, from what I hear this morning, a lot of interest in finding ways to do so. I know colleagues come with many positive ideas, constructive ideas, realistic ideas given the world that we live in and the financial challenges we're facing. And I think your suggestion that we have a conversation about that is both important and useful, and you will have our support, and the CAP will have our support as well in reaching a conclusion on this item. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador Adsett. I now offer the floor to the delegate from the United States. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, at the outset, let me also say the United States warmly welcomes St. Vincent and the Grenadines as chair of the Permanent Council. We look forward to closely working with you, Madam Chair. However, at the same time, we express our deep gratitude for Ambassador Darius Clark during her astute chairing of the Permanent Council over the last 3 months. The United States appreciates the report presented by the chair of the CAP on the efforts made to date to arrive at a consensus with regard to setting a budget ceiling for this organization in 2023. The U.S. delegation participated in those deliberations and put forward a good faith effort to arrive at a budget number allowing for the General Secretariat to timely distribute a draft 2023 budget program proposal to member states. We do regret the deadline to provide a budget ceiling has now passed, and as a result, the General Secretariat is now faced with less time to undertake the arduous work of presenting a proposal. This will in turn leave member states with less time to review and negotiate that proposal. We agree with Brazil and other delegations that collective responsibility is key, and that discussions about the organization's budget ceiling are best placed in the CAP. As such, we do look forward to resuming consideration of a budget ceiling in that setting as soon as possible this week. Thank you again, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. Having heard these deliberations, the chair suggests that the CAP proceed immediately with this matter and reach a final decision before July 20th. I now pause to offer the floor to Antigua and Barbuda. You have the floor, Excellency.
Chair, I apologize at the outset for pressing my button so late.
but I did want to make some brief remarks before this meeting concluded and before you summarized what happened this morning. I'm not going to be very long, Chair, except to say, first of all, I welcome you to the position of Chair of this Permanent Council. I have absolutely no doubt, nor does my delegation, that you will do a splendid job, a job for which we know that you are suited, and we've already seen the display of your many talents over the years that you've been here. Like others, I'd like to join in also congratulating Ambassador Elizabeth Darius-Clark for a splendid chairmanship of the organization, particularly as she came fresh from St. Lucia into the position, but handled it as if she were a veteran. So thanks to you both. Now, if I may turn quickly to the discussion that we've heard today. Chair, I have to admit to feeling a sense of unrealism listening to some of the presentations made here today. My delegation supports the view that we should have responsible budgets. However, I have to stress that we do not, while we say those words, we don't actually do them. What we have before us is hardly a responsible budget. The budget figure that we are talking about right now, Chair, is less than the figure we had in 2012. This means that despite all of the years of inflation that have gone by, particularly this year, which today in the United States, the official figures is that inflation has gone up by 10% over last year. What we're actually trying to do is to run a $110 million organization with $82.7 million. That is an impossibility, which I think everybody here will recognize. We can do it, but it does not show resilience. And I think that's the word that my good friend, the ambassador of Brazil, used in terms of how we describe this organization. $82.7 million to run a $110 million organization. Well, it shows something. Whether it is resilience is quite another matter. But we are seeing the effect of that in the fact that we have to dismiss staff. We've got to dismiss good people, and we're losing them hand over fist day after day. That cannot be good for the organization. People in the OAS are insecure. They are worried about what is going to happen in the future. We, the governments of the member states of this organization, have an obligation to address that question. Now, we also have a situation, apart from the fact that we are trying to feed 1 million with less than half a loaf of bread. We also have the situation in which 11 countries amongst us have not paid their contributions and are in arrears, some of them quite significantly. And if one or two of those countries, which owe the largest amounts of money, were to pay the arrears that they owe, we would not have the kinds of considerations that we are now going through. So I would appeal to those countries that do owe that money to recognize that part of having a responsible budget is responsible payment. And every country must address that question of how responsible it's being when it does not pay its subscription on time. Now, the other question is, we know we have a situation in which people do not pay, and in a sense, we encourage it. We encourage it, Madam Chair, because countries can owe this organization for 10 and 15 years, and no action is taken to stop it. We allow countries to accumulate arrears, and then there is no penalty. They can simply go on owing, and yet they can chair meetings. They can become the chair of the Permanent Council. They can make decisions that are binding on other countries in here that are paying. They're speaking for free. And, you know, I recall the words of a former ambassador of Barbados, who was also the chair of the CAP, who used to say we should have a policy of no pay, no say. And truthfully, that is becoming more and more important, particularly, and you'll forgive me for being so direct about this, but we have a country amongst us that is supposedly withdrawn. We have a purported representative in the place of that country. It now owes the organization a significant amount of money. The figure, as I see it, at the end of June was $17.4 million. We know that there is no possibility of that money being collected, yet we booked this money as a collectible. We booked $1.9 million as coming from that country for this year, yet we know it's not going to be paid. So what in effect is happening is we're giving that purported representative a $1.9 million fee for speaking in our council. And who's paying that $1.9 million? The rest of us who have to find it eventually. All of that is wrong, and it must be remedied. It cannot continue in this way. So I would sum up what my delegation feels about this in this way. One, we are being mean with the Organization of American States. We use it politically, but we do not use it for the purposes for which it is intended, to satisfy the needs of its people. It is not responsible, and it is not resilient. That's the first thing. Secondly, we have to do something about increasing the quota of all countries to this organization if it is to be functional and properly functional. If not, we should really contemplate whether we shouldn't close it down or limit its activities to such minor things that it really doesn't matter. The third thing I would say, that countries that don't pay must pay. And if they don't pay, we must institute penalties to encourage them to pay. People cannot turn up at meetings and chair meetings and talk without contributing to the organization. And finally, I would say this. The responsible thing to do is to pay. If you pay on time or pay on a payment plan, that's fine. But that is the responsible thing to do. But you should not be given an incentive for paying what you have a responsibility to pay. And I know a couple of my friends here who do pay on time will feel that's an unfair thing to say, but it's not. I pay rent to a landlord here. I cannot go to my landlord and say, I'm going to pay you on time, but you must give me an incentive for doing that. He would quickly have me out on the street. So why are we treating the organization any less than we would any normal situation? I end by saying this, Chair. This budget has to be looked at realistically. And it can't be about squeezing $1 here and $2 there for the benefit of some countries, but letting the organization flounder. We either make it mean something, and if we mean for it to make something, we cannot be mean with it. We have to contribute what it needs. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please allow me to warmly welcome you. We wish you the utmost success in your stewardship of the Permanent Council. I would also like to thank the Ambassador of St. Lucia for having presided over the Permanent Council over the previous quarter. Madam Chairperson, to start my intervention, I would like to thank the chairmanship of the CAP for the detailed report which was put forward today. I would like to underscore its commitment and how the last few months of deliberations have been managed to reach a consensus vis-à-vis the budgetary ceiling for 2023. As we all know, the negotiations regarding the budgetary ceiling have been extensive within the framework of the CAP, and this has happened over many months. In light of all of the effort undertaken by many member states and the flexibility that has been expressed by many delegations, it was possible to reach partial agreements. This notwithstanding, Colombia regrets that it was not possible to conclude these budgetary ceiling negotiations for them to come to fruition, which would facilitate the Secretariat in terms of the forecasting necessary for our budget for 2023. Colombia acknowledges the importance of reaching an agreement and doing so unanimously. This is the reason why that we feel that the most appropriate place to continue onward with these deliberations is within the framework of the CAP. This is the forum where we need to discuss this. We have bestowed upon them this responsibility to set the budgets for the next year. It is somewhat of an issue that it was deemed necessary to bring forward this discussion to the Permanent Council. We should not give up on the dialogue within the CAP. If we do this, this would be a huge blow to consensus. And the organization's well-being would be the most impacted. We do need to reach a decision in terms of our budgetary ceiling. That goes without saying. Postponing this issue would be a stumbling block for the work that our organization is undertaking. However, the fact that this is urgent, we should not be rushing this whole process. Consensus remains what we want within Colombia, and I urge all delegations that this should be the benchmark to continue moving forward, and moving forward to reach an accountable budgetary ceiling based on real forecasting. In order to achieve this goal, Colombia expresses anew our commitment to solidarity, cooperation, and democracy within our hemisphere. We recall that we need to foster dialogue among all nations so that we are efficient and accountable within all of the internal commissions, so that it could be in the best interest of all countries. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Aprovecho para.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to avail myself to be able to wish you our very best wishes, and I would also like to thank the outgoing chair for her exemplary stewardship. Venezuela, with regard to the budget within the OAS, and generally speaking, it is highly regrettable. It is one of the richest, wealthiest countries within our hemisphere, and currently we are in a dire situation. We are insolvent currently. We were a founding member of this organization, and since we were founded until 2010, Venezuela was exemplary in paying all of their fees to all our international organizations. In 2017, Nicolás Maduro's government decided to withdraw Venezuela from the OAS. We all know that our organization's standards set forth that there are 2 years to make that withdrawal effective, and it happens once all obligations, financial obligations, have been paid to the organization. The current debt that Venezuela has, it's close to the tune of $12 million that need to be paid, so that once the delegation has been withdrawn. A few days before, the Permanent Council recognized our delegation that I spearhead as the delegation of Venezuela. I feel that the dictatorial friends of Maduro who are here could possibly make it happen so that the 12 million could be paid, and that we can no longer need to have the conversation that we're having here today. The interim government of Venezuela does not have access to the normal budgetary items. The officials in our interim government are not receiving any type of income. We are making sure we are doing our very best to make sure that some of the assets that we have abroad that we could use to pay what we owe. And this is of paramount importance. Madam Chairperson, Venezuela will always support dialogue and consensus in this field and in many others. We fully support the efficient management that the Commission has undertaken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this may be a problem of translation. I'm willing to accept it may be a problem of translation, but I want to be sure that it is. I thought I heard Gustavo Tare just refer to the dictatorial friends of Nicolas Maduro. Could I have clarification as to whether he did in fact use those words, the dictatorial friends of Nicolas Maduro? Because if he did, I would wish him to name those dictatorial friends before he goes any further.
The point which was used earlier.
Dije muy claramente, señora.
Madam Chair, I said that around there were friends of the dictator Maduro. I didn't say that they were dictatorial friends of Maduro. I think that this is now crystal clear, and I hope that there wouldn't be any other repercussion of this mistake. I was about to conclude, Madam Chairperson, and I thank you for the time that you have bestowed upon me.
You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate you and express our commitment to your work as the chair of the PC. I would also like to thank the ambassador from St. Lucia and also her stewardship. During this negotiation for the ceiling for 2023, Chile feels that beyond all of these specific numbers, we try to avoid a deficit here. And this is not something that has happened since 2017 in this regard. We need to have realistic numbers in terms of fixed income. And with all of the discussions and all of the subtleties that they have put forward, it's at 82.4 million in miscellaneous income from the Secretariat as well. This is a key indicator, and it seems that we have need to compile these budgets, and I think that we have been impacted by the context, such as inflation and other issues that are happening worldwide. This is the reason if there is a lower number of the miscellaneous, the further we are from the fixed income, it is greater the probability that the OAS, we want to avoid what happened in 2017. Chile has put forward its flexibility, and we are focusing on the negotiations within the cap. More specifically, we would like to add that we are wholeheartedly convinced that this has been the goal in talking these topics, and we hope that we continue to discuss this. I would also like to thank Brazil's stewardship in and Paraguay and all the other members that have partaken in these meetings. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson.
The floor to Peru. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. First and foremost, I would like to express our full report from Peru in your management as the chair of the PC and also the work undertaken by Ambassador Darius Clark, which has been exemplary. I just wanted to be quite brief in my words here today. I would like to thank the stewardship from Brazil as the chair of the CAP. Peru has been at all of the informal and formal meetings to reach a consensus. We know that this has been a very hard work. It has been very difficult. We have done this with a great level of patience, and there has been an exemplary level of management in this regard. For Peru, it is also rather important that this topic be dealt with within the CAP. This is a topic of responsibility. There's technical work which must be undertaken. This is a budgetary issue, and we need to take into account all of these aspects so that we can reach a decision. In any event, consensus and the CAP's management, that is what we want. And we hope that we will reach a result soon so that it is not as close to the General Assembly, which is forthcoming in October, in the beginning from the 5th to the 7th of October. Thank you very much.
You have the floor.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson. Good morning, colleagues. Madam Ambassador, Ecuador wishes you the very best of success as your chairmanship of the PC, and it will be everyone's success. We reiterate our support and the work that we will be undertaken from Ecuador with the Permanent Council and with our organization. We would like to express our appreciation for the exemplary work of St. Lucia when it held the chairmanship. We acknowledge and recognize the work that has been undertaken within the CAP in fulfilling all of its responsibilities. I would also like to acknowledge the Vice Chair of CAP, who was kind enough to put forward the report which was devised by the CAP. I don't think that we don't need to reiterate all of the topics that have already been mentioned before, and with the understanding that we have, although we do need to remember that our organization has a valuable institutional heritage where all of the different commissions and committees have all had their own spheres of work, performance, and responsibility. The topic which we are addressing here at the Permanent Council we have undertaken a lot of work to try to reach consensus for this budget, for this budgetary ceiling. This is the end goal for all of us. It may seem that we need to take into account that this budgetary ceiling turns into a threshold for total expense. In this regard, we must be responsible, accountable, and realistic as possible in setting it. But in addition, in light of all of the current trends and situations that also come into play, we need to set responsibly and realistically all of these numbers, and the member states have now put forward their own opinions, and we see that consensus is possible and it can be reached within CAP. Therefore, as long as all of the members are willing to reach this consensus, the willingness of every single member country and as a group to reach consensus, this will make it possible for us to reach this goal. Ecuador undertakes to be flexible in building this consensus. Once again, it needs to be realistic. It needs to be a technical analysis so that our expense cannot be beyond our forecast expenses. And we must not be too optimistic in terms of the expected income that we foresee. The discrepancy between the numbers that were reached during the last CAP meetings are not that far off from one another, but we hope that members would be able to back the $82.7 million and $83 million, We hope that we'll continue with this negotiation without polarizing all of our opinions, but rather providing and recognizing the value of the technical arguments which back these numbers up. And regardless of how we're going to be looking at the forecasted income, of course, that goes without saying, it includes a part which could be interpreted differently by every single country. We need to be respectful and need to be mutually understanding towards each other. This will help us reach consensus despite all of the hurdles which we have grappled with, and many of these hurdles have now been overcome. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and thank you, colleagues, and one and all.
To the Ambassador of Costa Rica, Excellency, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I also echo the congratulations of the leadership of this council. We hope you and wish you the very best in exercising the chairmanship of this. And also, we'd also like to commend Ambassador Elizabeth Darius-Clark for her exemplary work over the last 3 months as the chair of the Permanent Council. I have a very brief intervention, Madam Chairperson. With regard to this topic, Costa Rica thanks the detailed report that was put forward by the Vice Chair of the CAP. We would also like to thank the Chair, Auriar Cacomino de Barros Núñez, who is the Minister of Brazil, who has done an outstanding job in light of very complex circumstances. We also deem, furthermore, that this is a highly technical topic, as we stated before, that it should be a discussion that should be held at the corresponding commission. Our delegation expressed this same opinion at that juncture when we talked about the possibility of putting this to the Permanent Council. We stated that this has been a very productive conversation, and we thank you, all delegations, for their productive contributions. We are willing to continue working within the framework of the CAP with a view to reaching a consensus in such an important topic. We reiterate anew that constructive dialogue must be the norm, and we also hope that the chair of CAP, with him, we understand that this will come to fruition and that we will be able to provide this information soon to the Permanent Council. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ambassador of Costa Rica just expressed exactly what I had in mind. Brazil's chairmanship is a guarantee for all of us, and we are seeking to find a professional solution, understanding, to reach a consensus, to getting for further rapprochement, and to find a better solution as well. This is indeed a technical issue here, but for our countries, it's the money that our countries are contributing. These are taxes that our countries pay. It's the contributions that our countries are making. It is the effort of our country's people. What this means is that we don't have too much of a margin to continue to avoid finding a solution to this issue. I have paid the utmost attention to the discussion within the CAP, our people as well, and I also pay attention to the discussion which has come to the fore here within the Permanent Council. It is my understanding, my impression, my feeling that we are relatively close to reaching 82.7, 83 million. I gather that we need to get to the end. We're in the home stretch. That's what I feel. I think it's just time. I do not know if you can, I am sure that you are understanding what I'm saying. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, please allow me to congratulate you in assuming the chairmanship of the PC, representing St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Madam Chair, you have the full support of Guatemala in everything that you see fit. I would also like to express a word of thanks to Ambassador Elizabeth Darius Clark for her stewardship in carrying out and spearheading the PC over the last 3 months. Guatemala would like to refer to item number 2 on our agenda in terms of the budgetary ceiling for 2023. We also like to thank the presentation and how we have put forward this report by the Vice Chair of CAP, Paraguay, with regard to the deliberations that were undertaken for the 2023 budget and the budget ceiling, which have been discussed within the CAP. It also includes the active engagement of Guatemala within these proceedings. Guatemala will continue to support an amount which would have an impact on OAS. We want to make sure that we don't impact. We impact as little as possible the OAS so that we can continue to fulfill our mandate as the OAS. We need to reflect the value or the importance that the OAS has for every single one of our states. My delegation would like to thank you for every single member state for the efforts which have been undertaken in this collective deliberation and also among the various deliberations within the CAP with a view to reaching a consensus in terms of the budgetary ceiling for 2023, and that we should undertake these negotiations significantly with a common front within the framework of the CAP, which was led by the chair of, which is Brazil, the minister from Brazil, with to continue to try to reach this consensus, which is the end goal that we all wish for it to come to fruition. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
CAP proceed immediately with this matter and reach a final decision before July 27th as proposed by the Bahamas on behalf of CARICOM, and to encourage the chair of CAP to incorporate direct engagement with countries that made budgetary ceiling proposals in an effort to generate consensus, and to inform the Permanent Council of the decision reached at the meeting immediately following. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. The next item on the order of business corresponds to the presentation of the report of the Chair of the Style Committee of the 51st Regular Session of the General Assembly, distributed as document CP Doc 5792/22. I am pleased to offer the floor to the Chair of the Committee, the alternate representative of Guatemala, Ms. Luisa Gatica. Ms. Gatica, you have the floor.
The English booth is having trouble hearing the Guatemalan delegate clearly. On the report of the work carried out by the Commission in complying with Article 58 of the General Assembly regulation and the mandate of the Permanent Council in November 2021. The decision of this Commission was composed by the delegations of the United States, for English, Brazil, for Portuguese, Canada for French, and Guatemala for Spanish. In complying with its mandate, we met virtually and openly with the participation of all delegations on four occasions, on the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th of June of this last month, to correct style and to ensure that the official languages text of the organizations were conforming. The Commission did not identify any problems of form that could not be corrected. And I point out the previous work carried out by the language section and the offices of the Secretariat for information of the delegations here present. And to conclude, on my own behalf as the representative of Guatemala, I thank the delegations to the United States and Canada and Brazil and the others who participated in the work of the Commission and all the other support received from the Secretariat to comply with our mandate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Offer the floor to delegations that wish to that wish to refer to this item on the agenda. There being no requests for the floor, I suggest that the Permanent Council take note of the report made by the Chair of the Style Committee of the 51st Regular Session of the General Assembly, as contained in document CP Doc 5792/22, and thank the delegations that participated in the activities of the Style Committee. There being no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. We will now consider the draft resolution, place and date of the meeting of consultation of the states parties to the Inter-American Convention Against Terrorism, submitted by the Permanent Mission of Peru and distributed as document CP Doc 5794/22. In this regard, I am pleased to offer the floor to the delegation of Peru to present this draft resolution. Ambassador, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 20 years ago, the member states of the OAS met in Barbados and adopted the Inter-American Commission, the framework agreement to promote greater cooperation against this scourge. On this anniversary date, on the 7th of March of this year, to the Secretariat, Peru presented its interest in holding an important meeting, and today has presented to this Permanent Council the resolution proposed, which established 12 September of 2022 as the meeting for consultation, and the 8th of 9th of September, dates around that date, as a meeting for the group of experts to prepare the consultation meeting, which we hope will be held in person in this capital city. I take advantage of this meeting to thank the delegation of the United States for having expressed its interest of presiding this session, as well as to thank the excellent support done by the Inter-American Commission Against Terrorism to ensure success for this meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there are no comments, we will proceed to its approval. Approved. We will now consider the draft resolution, date of the 22nd regular session of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, convened by Resolution 2970, as submitted by the Permanent Mission of Mexico and agreed upon by the Committee on Hemispheric Security at its meeting of June 30th, 2022, and forwarded to the Permanent Council for consideration as document CP/CSH 2147/22 Rev 1. In this regard, I am pleased to offer the floor to the delegation of Mexico to present this draft resolution. Mexico, you have the floor. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mexico congratulates that a distinguished and committed woman such as yourself be presiding the Permanent Council. You can count on my entire and wholehearted support to carry out all of the work necessary for the preparation of the General Assembly. On the last 30th of June, my delegation, in our capacity as the Vice Chair of the Commission, Inter-American Commission Against Terrorism, presented through the Commission on Hemispheric Security, one of its subsidiary organs, the proposal for the next 22nd ordinary meeting of meetings on the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, which was circulated as CP 2147-22. The Committee on Hemispheric Security agreed on the text of this, and which we present for approval by the member states present. Given the close time between now and the Inter-American Commission Against Terrorism, and to avoid a duplication, the government of Mexico proposes that the 22nd ordinary sessions of SICTE be a single day of virtual work that would allow us to review the advances of that committee on this very important issues, security and civil aviation, maritime and port security, cargo and containers, as well as the prevention of violent extremism and cybersecurity. This ordinary regular session, would also have the task of approving the paragraph to be presented to the Committee on Hemispheric Security to be included in the resolution on hemispheric security, which will be presented for the consideration of the General Assembly in its 52nd regular session. Additionally, as the government of Mexico did in presenting a draft regulation for the group of experts on money laundering, my delegation presented on the last 5th of July another proposal to correct where there will be a gap between activities and regulations of the chair and the vice chair throughout the annual sessions. This proposal is already before the delegations for their consideration, and allows for the delegations to assume these functions at the end of the general session, and not as it happens now at the beginning of the following session. This would allow for those responsibilities to be carried out throughout the annual session, and would avoid us to waiting for the vice chair to only take on this work when it assumes the presidency. The Executive Secretariat of SICTE has commenced circulating the first drafts of the working documents for this general regular session, and we hope to count on the support of the various delegations to work together so that the 22nd regular session of SICTE will be fruitful and relevant. My delegation, Madam Chair, proposes approval by acclamation of this resolution.
Mexico has proposed acceptance by acclamation. There are no objections. If there are no comments, we will proceed to its approval. Approved. Let us now proceed to the next item on our order of business, which is the adoption of the following minutes. Acta 2329 of the regular meeting of July 14th, 2021. Acta 2330 of the regular meeting of July 21st, 2021. Acta 2337 of the regular meeting of September 1st, 2021. Acta 2342 of the special meeting of September 29th, 2021. If there are no comments, we will proceed to adopt them. Approved. Distinguished representatives, we will now move to the last item, other business. I now offer the floor to delegations that wish to bring any informative issues to the attention of this council. I see that there are no requests for the floor. Argentina, disculpe.
I'm sorry, just a second.
Excellency, the floor is yours.
Sí. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies. First, let me express my greetings to the outgoing chair and express my welcome and congratulations. We are soon going to be upon the 18th of July, which will be the day on which we will commemorate the 28th anniversary of the extreme attack suffered by Argentina in the headquarters of the Mutual Aid Israelite Association, which took the lives of 85 persons with more than 300 injured. This was the most significant attack of this nature that was suffered in Argentina. The Argentine Foreign Ministry has asked all of our diplomatic missions to make a public pronouncement or reference on this 28th anniversary. We reiterate our commitment to peace, our condemnation of terrorism in all its forms, and the need to fight terrorism under the rule of law, international law, and respect for human rights. From that sad date to the present, our country has sought justice, incessantly sought justice, and until we achieve this, we must keep the memory of this event alive. We will not yield in our efforts to ensure that all those responsible for these events are brought before Argentine courts and are prosecuted and condemned in time. In this regard, Argentina continues to call on the Republic of Iran to cooperate with the judicial investigation of this attack and to respond to the 28 requests sent between the year 2000 and 2012, and to comply with the request for the extradition of Iranian citizens in order to clarify their responsibility. Additionally, we have included through red alerts from Interpol, and in this regard, we have recently renewed that period so that these are now in place until 2027. For this reason, we request all countries, friends of Argentina and friends of peace and justice, to cooperate in this process. Even though the attack was focused on a Jewish community center in Argentina, it was nonetheless an attack against democracy and freedom and the welfare of all of Argentine society. And for this reason, we need this to be clarified, because until this event is clarified, we will have that permanent debt in the Republic of Argentina. So I asked for the floor before expressing, before showing, if you will, a brief video. And I conclude with the words spoken by the President of the Republic of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, when he said that in memory of the 85 victims and in honor of those who lost loved ones, all of Argentina's men and women must join together against impunity.
Hay gente destrozada. La tragedia en Buenos Aires se vuelve a repetir. Se vuelve a repetir. ¡Abra mi casa, por favor! ¡Vamos! ¡Vamos! ¡Pero nadie! ¡No deben de pasar por el señor! ¡Es necesario hacer silencio para escuchar la voz de alguna vida y poderlo rescatar! ¡Silencio! Por favor, habla al aire, por favor.
Gran confusión, es imposible de describir el estado de conmoción inenarrable, lo que se está viviendo en Pasteur, entre Tucumán y Viamonte.
Abran el camino, señores.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Argentina. Ambassador of Uruguay, you have the floor, Excellency.
Usted sabe, Presidenta, que
As you are aware, Madam Chair, I had a completely different idea, but I expressed my appreciation to Carlos for his intervention. Because the phenomena of terrorism are the great enemies of our democracies. For Jews, additionally, and for those who defend Jews, this reminder that we have just seen is absolutely necessary. Not only this one, but that of the and where there are in any place in the world clear anti-Semitic attacks that create rivers of blood. The violence of terrorism has always a specter to it. Days ago, the King of Spain was remembering Miguel Ángel Blanco 25 years ago, when totalitarian and authoritarian act took his life. That was also an act of terrorism. Terrorism, as we have experienced it in our continent, when on more than one occasion we might hear that because of some supremacist view, someone has the right to take the life of another on grounds that some might defend on principles of democracy. But I think it is timely that we pause to remember that those of us, those who are Democrats, we counter these terrorist attacks with weapons that are much more fragile. We who defend democracy know that we must never resort to violence. We know that we must use instruments. We know that we are weaker, and I'll finish with this. And as we are weaker in our arms, we have to be prudent, intelligent, and have foresight and anticipate. The reminder that we have just heard from my friend is entirely pertinent. Thank you.
Of the video that was shown to us. However, I'd like to remind the delegations that this item, other business, is for informative purposes, and it's not the time for interventions to be made, respectfully. I see that there are no further requests for the floor. There being no further business to consider, this meeting is adjourned.